The dress alone tells a story. It took Jean Louis, one of Hollywood's most celebrated costume designers, $6,000 and 2,000 flesh-toned rhinestones to make it. A gown so sheer, so precisely calculated in its revelation, that the press corps at Madison Square Garden on the night of May 19, 1962 fell briefly and collectively silent when she appeared. It weighed almost nothing. It was a work of art, the art of maximum visibility, of a surface so perfectly managed that it became, paradoxically, the most powerful thing in the room. She could barely walk in it. She had been sewn into it backstage, the seam stitched closed around her body, and she moved toward the microphone with careful, deliberate steps. 15,000 people in the hall watched her walk. The President of the United States watched her walk. The cameras watched her walk. Because watching her was what you did when she was in a room, the involuntary, helpless response that her presence always produced. She was late. She was always late, and the lateness was always explained and always excused. Part of the same fundamental dynamic in which the world arranged itself around her, waited for her, accommodated her. She had kept 15,000 people waiting. She had kept the president waiting. When she finally appeared, the waiting was forgiven instantly, in the way that can only be forgiven by an audience that has already given itself entirely to the person they were waiting for. The event was a fundraising gala for the Democratic Party, organized as a celebration of John Kennedy's 45th birthday, held at Madison Square Garden because the scale of the occasion required scale. Marilyn Monroe was the most exciting and most watched element of American life. Her presence was the headline. The very announcement that she would perform had driven ticket sales beyond expectation. People wanted to be in the room with her, wanted to breathe the same air, wanted to be part of whatever moment she would create. She had worked on it. The performance is sometimes described as effortless, as natural, as simply what happened when Marilyn Monroe stood in front of a microphone. It was not effortless. She rehearsed. She thought about it carefully, about the voice, about the quality of the delivery, about exactly what she wanted to communicate and how. She made choices. The choice she made, and it was absolutely a choice, was to make the most famous man in the world sound like he was being seduced in public. The breathy, slowed, intimate quality of the delivery, the pauses, the private quality of a voice that was somehow simultaneously public and addressed specifically to one person, this was not accident. It was precision. She was an extraordinarily precise performer when she cared about a performance, and she cared about this one. The performance lasted approximately 3 minutes. In those 3 minutes something happened that people who were present have tried, over the decades, to put into words and have largely failed. Not because the words don't exist, but because what happened was in a register that precedes words. It was one of those rare moments where the performance and the reality and the meaning all coincide so completely that the audience experiences the full weight of what the event is about. What it was about was complicated. What it looked like was desire, explicit, public, entirely directed at the president. What it actually was, for the woman performing it, was something more layered. She cared about Kennedy, in the complicated way she had come to care over years of an on and off connection. She knew, by May of 1962, that the connection was being managed, that her access was being controlled, that the relationship was not what she had believed. She knew this, and she stood at the microphone in the dress of 2,000 rhinestones and performed, publicly, the version of caring the world expected to see. There is a level on which the happy birthday performance is the most honest thing she ever did in public, the fullest expression, on the largest possible stage, of the fundamental condition of her existence. To feel something real and perform it in a way that makes it larger and more visible and more perfect than the real thing, while the real thing, the actual woman, the actual feeling, the actual complexity, remains completely hidden behind the performance. She had been doing this her whole life. Here she was doing it at Madison Square Garden. But what the world didn't see that night, what the world almost never saw, was the woman who existed in the hours before the performance. The woman who sat in her dressing room with a copy of Ulysses open on her lap, the margins filled with her handwriting. The woman who had been reading Joyce for months, working through the difficult passages slowly, refusing to give up when the text became opaque. This was not props. This was not image management. No cameras were present in the dressing room. No one was watching. She read because reading was what she did when she was alone, when the performance was not required, when she could be the self that the world had decided didn't exist. Peter Lawford introduced her. His introduction was a joke, a series of escalating descriptions of her lateness before finally presenting her as the late Marilyn Monroe, the word late doing double work that no one at the time fully understood. He meant chronologically late, of course. He was playing her habitual tardiness for laughs. But he said it in May of 1962, and she was dead in August of 1962, and the word late, applied to her at a public event 3 months before her death, has not lost its weight in the 60 years since. She was late. She was also, by May of 1962, in the middle of something her closest friends could see was reaching a crisis. The situation at Fox was already difficult. The relationship with the Kennedy brothers was in its most complicated phase. The surveillance she had become aware of, the tapped phones, the managed access, the sense of being watched by forces she could not fully identify, was beginning to shape her understanding of her situation in ways that were clarifying and terrifying simultaneously. And yet she stood at the microphone in the dress and gave the room the concentrated essence of the persona. Marilyn Monroe at her most Marilyn Monroe, performing the desire the world had spent 15 years wanting to see performed. Kennedy's reaction is documented. He came to the stage and said, into a microphone, in front of 15,000 people, "I can now retire from politics, having had Happy Birthday sung to me in such a sweet, wholesome way." The crowd laughed. He was being appropriately ironic, acknowledging the gap between the description and the reality, the two of them conducting a public conversation in a language that everyone in the room understood without it ever being spoken plainly. 3 months later she was dead. Kennedy was assassinated 14 months after that. The gala, the dress, the performance, the exchange at the microphone, all of it takes on a different quality when you know what came after. Two people at the peak of their visibility, performing their public selves with extraordinary precision, while the private reality, complicated, damaged, running out of time, hid in plain sight. The world knew her as the blonde bombshell. The dizzy sex bot. The girl who couldn't quite keep up, who played dumb because playing dumb was what got you noticed in Hollywood, what got you cast, what made men feel comfortable and powerful and in control. The girl in the white dress standing over the subway grate, skirt billowing, laughing with manufactured delight while the cameras rolled and the crew watched and the performance of availability continued. What the world didn't know, what the world refused to know even when presented with direct evidence, was that she owned over 400 books. That her personal library included Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Kafka, Joyce, Freud, and volumes of poetry she had annotated in her own hand. That she had taught herself to read German well enough to work through Rilke in the original. That she kept notebooks filled with her own poetry, fragments of thought, attempts at making sense of a life that seemed designed to prevent sense-making. The discovery of her library after her death confused people. Journalists struggled to reconcile the image they had promoted for years with the physical evidence of intellectual engagement that filled her bedroom. Some speculated the books were decorative. Some suggested they had been purchased by assistants trying to make her seem more cultured. Some simply ignored the evidence entirely, preferring the comfortable fiction they had already constructed. But the books were real. And they were read. Her copy of Ulysses was heavily annotated. Her volumes of poetry showed the careful attention of someone who returned to passages again and again, working through meaning, making connections. She had circled phrases, underlined sentences, written questions in the margins. The marks of active engagement. The evidence of a mind refusing to accept the limitations the world had assigned to it. She had started buying books seriously in the mid-1950s, during her marriage to Arthur Miller. Miller was a serious writer, a serious intellectual, and she had approached his world with the same focused determination she brought to everything she cared about. But the reading had started long before Miller. The desire to understand, to know, to be more than the image, that had been there from the beginning. Her friend and acting coach, Lee Strasberg, remembered conversations with her about Stanislavski, about the method, about the psychological foundations of character. She asked detailed questions. She read the source material. She wanted to understand not just how to perform emotion but why the performance worked, what made one choice authentic and another false. Norman Rosten, the poet who became one of her closest friends in New York, gave her books constantly. He introduced her to contemporary poetry, to the modernists, to writers working in forms that challenged conventional narrative. She responded to difficulty. She liked poetry that required work, that didn't give up its meaning easily. She said once that she trusted things that made her think, that made her feel like she was discovering something rather than being told something she already knew. The poetry she wrote herself was fragmentary, unfinished, raw. She was not a trained poet and didn't pretend to be. But the poems that survive show a mind working through pain and isolation with serious attention to language. She wrote about being watched, about the gap between the public self and the private self, about loneliness and the specific quality of being surrounded by people who want something from you that has nothing to do with who you actually are. One fragment, found in a notebook after her death, reads, "Help, help, help, I feel life coming closer when all I want is to die." The rawness of it, the directness, the absence of performance. This is what she wrote when no one was watching, when the cameras were off, when she could afford to be the person the world had decided couldn't exist. The studio system of the 1950s had very specific ideas about women. Beautiful women existed to be looked at. Smart women existed to be secretaries or schoolteachers or somehow unsuited for romantic happiness. The combination of beauty and intelligence was treated as impossible, a category error, something that violated the fundamental logic of how the world was supposed to work. Marilyn Monroe violated that logic constantly. And Hollywood punished her for it, over and over, with a determination that suggests the violation was felt as a genuine threat. She wanted to play serious roles. She wanted to work with serious directors. She wanted to be given material that treated her as an actor capable of complexity rather than a body that happened to be able to speak lines. The studio heads listened to these requests and then cast her in the same role again and again. The dumb blonde, the sexual innocent, the girl who doesn't quite understand what's happening but manages to be charming anyway. When she fought for better roles, she was labeled difficult. When she showed up late to set because she had spent the night working on a scene, trying to find something real in material that had been designed to prevent reality, she was labeled unprofessional. When she asked questions about motivation or character or the internal logic of a scene, the response was often dismissive, a reminder that her job was to look good and deliver lines, not to think. The contempt was casual and constant. Directors would explain things to her slowly, as if speaking to a child. Studio executives would make decisions about her career without consulting her, treating her as property rather than as a person with agency. The press played along, writing stories that reinforced the image of the beautiful woman who couldn't quite manage the demands of adult life. And she absorbed it. Not because she believed it, but because fighting it required energy she often didn't have, and because the cost of fighting, the label of difficult, the loss of roles, the threat of being replaced, was always made clear. But in private, away from the cameras and the sets and the carefully managed public appearances, she built a different life. She sought out intellectuals. She cultivated friendships with writers and poets and artists who took her seriously. She read voraciously. She asked questions. She refused to accept the boundaries that Hollywood had constructed around what she was allowed to be. The dress is in a museum now. It sold at auction in 2016 for nearly $5 million, the most expensive piece of clothing ever sold at auction at that time. It is smaller than you expect. The reality of her body, preserved in the shape of the dress, is a reminder that the image, like all images, has been enlarged by repetition until it exceeds its actual proportions. The musicians who played that night remember the rehearsals. She was meticulous. She ran the song again and again, adjusting the phrasing, listening to herself, changing small things. The conductor, Richard Adler, said he had not expected her to care as much as she did about getting it exactly right. The perfectionism was not vanity. It was the deep seriousness of a person who understood, from long experience, that the work was the only thing that was entirely hers. The films could be interfered with, the contracts could be violated, the relationships could be taken away. But the performance, once given, existed on its own terms. Could not be taken back. Could not be revised by people who had decided it suited their interests to revise it. She gave it everything because the performance was the one thing she owned completely. And what she gave, in those 3 minutes at Madison Square Garden, was the most complete expression of herself she had ever offered to the public. Not the real self, The real self stayed hidden, in the notebooks and the private conversations and the books under the bed. But the performed self, given with full intention and full understanding of exactly what she was doing and why. The world watched. The world always watched. But that night, for 3 minutes, the watching felt like seeing, like the world, gathered with its cameras and its attention, was actually looking at the person who was there and not just the image they had come to see. She knew the difference. She always knew the difference. After the performance, after the cameras stopped rolling and the crowd dispersed and the president returned to whatever presidents return to after being seduced in public, she went back to her life. The life of books and notebooks and the ongoing attempt to make sense of experience through language. The life of midnight reading by lamplight, working through difficult passages of Joyce or Rilke, marking pages, writing notes, building the private intellectual world that the public world insisted couldn't exist. She died 3 months later, on August 5, 1962, in circumstances that remain disputed. The official cause was barbiturate overdose. Whether it was suicide or accident or something else has been debated for 60 years and will likely be debated for 60 more. But what is not debatable is this: she died alone, in a house she had only recently bought, surrounded by the books she had collected over years of careful reading. The books outlasted her. The library was catalogued, photographed, eventually dispersed. Scholars who examined it were surprised by its depth and range. The annotations revealed someone engaged in serious intellectual work. The marginalia showed a mind working through complex ideas with patience and care. But the surprise itself is telling. The evidence had always been there. She had talked about her reading in interviews, when interviewers bothered to ask. She had been photographed with books, had discussed ideas with the intellectuals who took her seriously. The information was available. It just wasn't compatible with the story the world had decided to tell about her. So the story persisted. Still persists. Marilyn Monroe as tragic victim, as beautiful disaster, as cautionary tale about the dangers of fame and beauty and Hollywood's cruel machinery. All of which is true, but incomplete. Because it leaves out the intelligence. Leaves out the reading and the writing and the serious engagement with ideas. Leaves out the woman who taught herself German and read Dostoevsky and wrote poetry in notebooks she never intended anyone to see. The woman who gave the world Marilyn Monroe while keeping herself, her actual self, carefully hidden. Who understood exactly what the performance cost and chose to pay the cost anyway because the alternatives were worse. Who was brilliant and precise and serious and funny and deeply, terribly lonely in the specific way that comes from being seen constantly without ever being recognized. Happy birthday, Mr. President. She meant it. She always meant everything she gave. The world was lucky to receive it. It was not, in the end, grateful enough. But perhaps gratitude is not the right word. Perhaps what she deserved was not gratitude but recognition. The simple acknowledgement that she was who she was, not who the world needed her to be, not who the cameras made her appear to be, but who she actually was in the private moments when the performance could finally stop. The books remain. The notebooks remain. The annotated poetry, the written fragments, the evidence of a mind engaged in the ongoing work of understanding. They sit in archives now, available to anyone who wants to look. Available to anyone willing to see past the image to the person underneath. She was Marilyn Monroe. But she was also Norma Jean. Was also the woman who read by lamplight and wrote in notebooks and thought carefully about language and meaning and the gap between who you are and who the world insists you must be. The world got Marilyn. But Norma Jean, the reader, the writer, the thinker, the woman at midnight with a book in her hands, she stayed hidden. Stayed safe. Stayed hers. And maybe that was the final act of resistance. To keep something back. To refuse to give them everything. To preserve, in the private space of reading and writing, a self that the cameras could never capture and the world could never consume. But the books remain. The evidence remains. The proof that she was brilliant, that she worked, that she thought seriously about serious things while the world insisted she couldn't. And that evidence, quiet but persistent, is still there. Still waiting. Still demanding to be seen. Waiting for a world finally willing to look.